Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome. Great to see you here. Second day, first session in the morning. Quite a turnout for that time. But I guess that's because of this exciting topic, right? We all hear all the time in the media, in the news, everywhere about climate change. We talk about it all the time, but what we want to do in this session is we want to really zoom in into practical examples, how basin organizations, national governments, academia deal with challenges that relate specifically to floods and droughts, obviously many of them driven by climate change. And we want to see how we can share experiences, how to deal with those. From a technical level, of course, flood forecasting, drought management, but specifically also from a water diplomacy perspective. So how can we work together across science and policy to not only address the technical challenges that come with these changes, but to also make sure that increasing water scarcity, as we're seeing it right now as we're talking in Iran and Afghanistan, for example, with Tehran and Kabul approaching day zero, or floods as we've seen them just a little less than 2 years ago in Slovenia. How can we deal with those in a way that we prevent or mitigate the impacts on people and the environment, but also deal with them in a way that they don't lead to conflicts, to disagreements between communities, but specifically also between countries. So that's the aim for today's session. The session will consist of some keynote inputs in the beginning, then we have a panel discussion, but we explicitly invite all of you to engage in the discussion. That can be through questions, but that can also be through sharing your own experiences from whatever region, basin you come from. So it's really about exchanging experiences and actually starting the discussion only. 1.5 hours is quite short, so the idea is that you take your discussion with the people that you've been engaging with outside after the session, continue over coffee, and hopefully establish new connections, new networks. But without any further ado, I'd like to hand over first for some introductory remarks to Dr. Miriam Haritz. She's the German water director, works at the German Ministry for the Environment, and has her own experiences with turning water climate challenges into cooperation. Miriam, please. Morning.
Wow, so many microphones. Which one do I choose? Okay, I hope you can all hear me regarding these many microphones. Wonderful, now I hear it. Perfect. Thank you so much for the introduction, and thank you so much for giving me the honor of being the first speaker this morning and addressing a couple of words, introductory remarks to you. So, without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, I am really very glad to start, because for me it's also the first day, the first thing this morning, into World Water Week with a topic that is not only close to my heart, but also part of my two job positions. Both as German water director and also as the current president of the International Commission for the Protection of the Rhine, I regard water cooperation instrumental for overcoming the global water crisis. Across the world, water has become the messenger for many man-made problems, be it due to climate crisis or growing pollution. We are all united in crisis, but we should also be united in solutions. Water-related disasters have become a constant and costly threat, and a couple of examples were already given. The only positive thing about this is that finally there is a global awareness for the problem. I'm happy to see that part of this awareness leads to more acceptance of the fact that water does not stop at national or regional borders, and that cooperation is the key word. The growth of supporters to the UN Water Convention clearly illustrates this. Water cooperation and water diplomacy are gaining, rightfully so, more and more relevance. Why? Well, even countries previously labeled as water-rich and not so disaster-prone like Germany and the whole Rhine Basin start to suffer from drought and increased variability of rainfall. Too much, too little water. Suddenly, we see the changes right outside our own doors. Already today, these extremes have significant impacts on various economic sectors such as agriculture, forestry, energy production, shipping, and industry. And I am sure colleagues present today from other basin regions will share similar experiences and perspectives. We need to learn how to manage climate change-related extreme events, both cross-border and cross-sectoral. Water in our policies is a central element to that. So this year in July, we celebrated the 75th anniversary of the International Commission for the Protection of the Rhine. The ICPR is one of the oldest international river cooperation commissions. And we are grateful for having a framework that helped us navigate the management of the Rhine River basin for such a long time already. And part of this commission's success has been that it evolved over time and adapted, always helping its member states to address new challenges together in a trusted environment. And mind you, this process started only a few years after the end of World War II, which we celebrated this year 80 years of. And it gathered former enemies at the same table for tackling mutual and shared water challenges. I think that's really a great success story and shows the potential of water cooperation and water diplomacy, water for peace. The fact that we already have this well-established framework is giving me hope in face of climate-related challenges that require adaptation in many ways. And therefore, the ICPR is currently reviewing its climate change adaptation strategy. We used to look more at flooding patterns, and now we're looking at drought and low water issues. Future water discharge patterns and temperature scenarios have already been updated, and we continue to working on that with scientists in the member states. Looking beyond the Rhine River, I believe that transboundary water resource management is a key tool to help basins worldwide become more resilient to a changing climate. And this is a prerequisite for both countries' economic development as well as peace and stability. So we need to keep learning from each other, share our best practices, exchange information, and support capacity development. Transboundary water resource management is one of the keys we already have in our hands to address the growing water-related challenges in shared water resources. And I'm really happy that today the International Commission for the Protection of the Rhine is part of this growing active community. I'm looking forward to today's session and wish you and us all a fruitful World Water Week. Let us be united in solutions indeed. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Miriam, also for very hopeful introductions. I think that sets the right tone, being optimistic about being united over water, even if the challenges are increasing. So I think that's a nice sort of segue into our first keynote presentation. We have two very brief keynotes, one looking more at floods, one looking more at droughts, just to inspire your thinking, share with you some ideas of how this is being done in two specific basins that we'll focus on, but then later we'll broaden it to other regions. I'm very happy that we have with us this morning Sompon Kampan from the Lao National Mekong Committee Secretariat, so from the Mekong, representing the Mekong River Commission and its member states, who will share some experiences with how the Mekong community deals with floods, which has certainly been a challenge. Please, Sompon, the floor is yours.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Sompon Kampan, from the representative from the Mekong Region Committee. I will present today, that we have the existing presentation on innovative for Mekong, one Mekong application to transforming a platform, that designed by enhance community collaboration data access. We know that real-time situation making in the Mekong basins. In the MRC, we are developing the mobile application. We call the one Mekong application to provide, that's the real-time information about river, including the water level and weather forecast and flood and out. Okay, sorry.
Introducing
We also have the flood and out forecast. In terms of our objective, we have to increasing application awareness for the notification local community, We also leave the local engagement. We come to the MRC forecast and early warning system team also to develop, building the long-term user relationship between the community participation on that. This is for our presentation, and we have the next slide for this. We have video and, sorry. Okay, yeah. You're going the wrong way. Okay, sorry. It's here, right? Okay. Yeah. 21. Oh, no.
Introducing iReport, a community-driven real-time warning. This is a flash flood, and right now, there are thousands of people capturing it on camera and sharing it on social media. iReport from One Mekong app lets you harness your social media to produce more relevant and timely incident reports live from the local community. Your social media produce a wealth of content, videos, comments, and photos that can effectively be used by iReport to make a difference and save lives. You will become part of our monitoring and forecasting team. iReport deepens the connection between the community and incident monitoring, making you own the Mekong River and become part of saving lives. Join now and become part of the iReport community to make a difference.
Thank you for watching video. For the next slide, we also, thank you for UK to support, budget, and we are developing a web app by Mekong Region Committee. In terms of for our open launching, we are working with the base community to do the report in the one mobile app. They also to develop and report exactly data in terms of for our member country also. This is for our launching and early warning system in local in the southern of Laos. We also, this is for my one mobile app. We also invite one Mekong, one spirit. Thank you so much. This is for my presentation. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Sompon. I find it fascinating how the communities are being involved. Having worked and lived in the Mekong, I remember seeing the really disastrous impacts of floods on the communities years ago because there was just simply no warning. And the progress that has been made over the last 10 years or so to not only warn community in sort of a one-way direction, but really involve them in flood prevention, flood warning, I think is just really amazing to see. Let's move to the Danube River Basin, a basin that I think many of us, similar to the Rhine, as Miriam mentioned earlier, associate with enough water. However, that has changed quite a bit in the last years, as Birgit Vogel, the Executive Secretary of the ICPDR, will tell us. Birgit.
Thank you so much, Susanne. Good morning to everyone. Pleasure to be here. As Susanne said, I want to introduce you to the side of the Danube you might not be so familiar with. It's not about water quality and water status, but it's about water quantity. So I have the same problem. To you. No. Okay. Right. Sorry for that. Most of you know the Danube Basin, and I know I keep repeating myself a little bit with these slides for those who've seen it already, but I just want to emphasize the Danube River Basin covers 10% of the surface area of Europe, so it is a significant basin where we need to address the transboundary aspects in a good coordination, cooperation, and management. We do have 15 contracting parties. We are implementing the Danube River Protection Convention. We are also responsible to implement the Water Framework Directive and Floods Directive, and of course, being water and climate resilient is an important task. You can see the predictions regarding climate change here for temperature, for precipitation until the end of the century. And I can tell you these predictions are rather dramatic. predicting significant temperature increases until the end of the century with a northwest-southeast tendency. It can be said that the summers are expected to get really drier and the winters with less snow, they will be wetter. That has will have quite an impact, and we can already see it on the discharge pattern on the Danube and the tributaries, and it will get more extreme with glaciers really reducing already very much in the upper Danube river basin. We brought as a measure, as an action, a climate adaptation strategy into place in 2012. It was revised in 2018, so that was a first step. But there's more action needed. That was realized with the extreme drought events in 2022 and 2023, and the heads of delegations of the ICPDR decided and made clear that we have to develop an ICPDR overview report on droughts. I will come to this in a moment. But maybe just 5 minutes is short, but just to give you a short insight, you can see on the left-hand side the drought events starting in 2015, and they were repeating in a regular level. You can see a map by the JRC showing the drought event for Europe, but also in the Danube River Basin in 2022 and 2023. And our basin was really affected strongly. All the Balkan countries, also Romania, Bulgaria, Moldova, Ukraine, significantly economic damage. Navigation was standing still for a few weeks. Also in 2015, the droughts were really severe, reducing the discharge of the Danube at the confluence with the Black Sea by 1/3. So these are clear signals. Something needs to be done. What you can see on this slide is as well the economic impacts that happen when drought events are taking place, and they can be indeed far more severe than effects from floods. Floods are more obvious. Droughts, a lot of impacts are happening on the water uses, and we need to be aware of this. So we do have impacts on the ecosystems, on the water uses. We are expecting more water scarcity, and we have to be aware that, of course, reduced water quantity can lead as well to an increased resource overexploitation, and therefore a consequence can be an increased competition over water. And in the Danube River Basin, as well as in other, we heard it from the Rhine, European basins, river commissions, we want to be prepared for this situation so we can act accordingly when it's needed. Last slide already, so I stay within my time. So basin-wide preparedness for increased droughts and also flood events are essential. We should be aware that, and we see that already, there's a higher alteration between extreme events. So there, in the Danube River Basin, we can have extreme drought events, and in parallel, we can have extreme flood events, and they keep changing on a regular level. I mentioned the ICPDR overview report on drought and low water levels. That's a report we developed to get an overview what's actually happening in our 14 contracting party countries when it comes to droughts. It's summarizing policies that are in place or not in place, strategies, databases, and measures. And based on that, we made a list of 10 actions that can or could be taken on the basin-wide level regarding droughts in the Danube River Basin. These suggestions were discussed by our heads of delegation, and we had an extraordinary meeting in May this year where the heads of delegation chose 3 topics to be tackled in future. This includes the definition of common drought indicators. We don't have a harmonized approach on identifying low water levels. I know the Rhine has something like that, so we have to catch up on that for sure. And then to develop a harmonized basin-wide drought monitoring system. We are also in exchange with the Joint Research Center on that. And related capacity building is very important when it comes to droughts. In parallel, we are developing, or researchers are developing, a basin-wide water balance. This does not exist in the Danube River Basin yet, but of course this is crucial. And the intersectoral exchanges, talking with navigation, hydropower, water supply, and also the agricultural sector. That's of course important to have a common approach and a consensus how we are going to deal and manage droughts in future in the Danube River Basin. And with this, I can close my short presentation.
Thanks a lot, Birgit. It's very interesting to see how droughts are being addressed in the Danube now, and how the Danube needs to catch up and has acknowledged the need to catch up to with a challenge that was, well, for quite some time not present. We do have time for 1 or 2 questions that specifically focus on the presentation. So anything you didn't understand, anything you'd like to hear a little bit more about, before we then head into the panel discussion where you can share sort of your broader thoughts. But is there any specific questions on either the Mekong or the Danube presentation? And please really wave your arm, because of the light, I can't really see you. Here. I see some movement here in the middle. Please just say your name and your institution, and then your quick question.
Good morning. My name is Josie Singram. I'm from local government in South Africa, skills development. I think the key issue I'm interested in is around the capacity building, whether it is for flooding or drought, and how we build a coordinated capacity building mechanism from community to local government to national government to address these issues. I'd like to hear from the 2 presenters. Thank you.
Thanks. Maybe we take one more question and then we come to the presenters. Yes.
Morning. My name is Tobias Schmitz. I'm from the Water Diplomat. I have a question about, to Sampan actually, about the community-driven warning system, how that works in detail, actually, you know, how the sharing of information from the community works, and how communities are actually, how the outreach takes place to involve them in the process of building the platform. Thank you.
Great. So we'll maybe start with Sampan with both questions on how the community... Do you want to come here again? It's easier for people to see you. So maybe you can respond to both questions. Capacity, join me.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your presentation. This is for our community involved on for our early warning system. We also have the line agency to the local community. They're also in terms of one mobile app. We also support community based. They're gonna take picture and report in the app, one mobile app. In terms of we have 2 users. One of user they call from the government side. We have to put take photo directly in report. And in terms of public user, the community involved in the take the photo, but we back up in the actual the data in terms of publication in the one mobile app. In terms of our regional also, we have the Thai, Vietnam, and Cambodia, Laos. They also have to involve on that community. Is very important. In our region we have so many typhoon come. In terms of Laos also, we have the northern part, southern part. That very important for our awareness. In terms of the government also to support on the community is, in the northern part, we have to, landslide audit. Okay, this is for our sharing the data. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Sampan. Birgit, do you want to maybe add on the capacity development? How do you do that across 15 countries?
Yeah. Okay. Yep. Yeah, I mean, of course, that's not an easy question to answer, but we, in the overview report that I mentioned, we identified clearly capacity gaps, and I also want to connect that to flood management in the Danube River Basin, where we have clearly identified the experts being responsible on a basin-wide level. This is different with the drought topic. So this identification is not here. We don't have an expert group or task group regarding drought management within the ICPDR. So we really need to see what will be the mechanism to tackle droughts and how can we, address the national level, but also levels below it to really be efficient with this topic. So it's something we are going to look into. But it will be a challenge.
Thanks, Birgit. I would suggest we move to the panel. I'd like to invite all the panelists here to the stage. We'll introduce you as we give, as we ask you your questions. But if you could all join me already here, we have to stand. Sorry, we don't have chairs. We didn't get any. But what we want to do in the panel, we basically want to take the discussion that we now started with the Mekong and the Danube further and broaden our perspective a bit. Broaden it to different basins, broaden it up to the global level, look at research, look at communities. And our underlying question is, what are effective practices, transboundary water management practices, water diplomacy practices, specific solutions that you have or that you see developing to address climate-related risks, floods and droughts, and address them, as I was saying in the very beginning, from a technical perspective, but also very much with the political perspective in mind. How do we prevent, how do we mitigate any disputes that might arise from these challenges? And we'll start at the global level. We'll start with you, Sonja. Sonja Köppel, UNECE, is the Secretary of the UN Water Convention, so obviously covers the global perspective. There has been quite a bit of work done on the topic of climate change, dealing with climate change related challenges. So Sonja, what tools or what mechanisms does the convention, the Water Convention, provide that can help countries facing these flood risks, drought risks, climate risks in general?
Thank you very much. Good morning, and thank you for inviting us today. I'll start with some general lessons from the work of the Water Convention, but also global. I think as the examples shown in the keynote speeches have shown, and as also a study by the Adaptation Fund has shown, transboundary cooperation adaptation can really help to make adaptation more effective and more efficient by sharing data, by enlarging the planning space, by sharing good practices, and also even sharing costs and benefits. But this requires, as a first step, appropriate institutional frameworks, and legal and institutional frameworks, such as strong and effective basin organizations. And if we look at the outcomes of the third reporting on the SDG indicator 6.5.2, we can see that actually quite some cooperation is already happening on flooding, but less on drought. 48% of basin organizations so far are dealing with droughts, and quite a number of transboundary agreements do not yet address such topics. But there can be also solutions such as developing additional protocols to transboundary agreements or including flood and drought and climate change adaptation more broadly into basin management plans, etc. So far, less than 20% of basin organizations have a joint climate change adaptation strategy. So I hope that those good examples which we heard from Danube, Rhine, and Mekong will be replicated. Additional aspects which increase adaptive capacity in joint basins are obviously data exchange and joint monitoring, which is actually happening in quite a number of shared basins. Also notification, but early warning systems, for example, for floods are already much more frequent than early warning system for drought. Only 30% of transboundary basins have also early warning system and joint indicators, as we had earlier for drought. So we need capacity building, learning, and exchange of experience. And this is exactly what the Water Convention provides. As probably many of you know, the Water Convention is a unique, now global legal and intergovernmental framework and platform for transboundary cooperation, which has been enforced since 1996 and open globally to all UN member states since 2016. And we currently have 56 parties, including 15 from outside the Pan-European region. Latest, Bangladesh joined just in June this year, and more than 20 other countries are in the process of joining. And especially it's a living framework, and that's why the parties in 2006 decided it's important to address climate change and created a task force on water and climate. And that task force has developed already quite a number of tools, which you can see here, such as the guidance on water and adaptation to climate change, a collection of lessons learned and good practices, and also a specific publication with the World Bank on financing adaptation to climate change in transboundary basins. And then we also help to apply these tools through global workshops, such as a global workshop on transboundary flood management in March this year, or on drought last year. And we try to integrate those issues into the global processes, such as the currently ongoing discussions on the global goal adaptation under the UNFCCC. The Water Convention also has a global network of basins working on climate change, with 19 basins already joining, and I hope more will join from particularly Asia and Latin America. We have a number of pilot projects in transboundary basins to help them adapt jointly to climate change and to actually apply some of the tools I mentioned earlier. And I want to conclude with one example, which comes from Central Europe. This is the Dniester Basin shared by Ukraine and the Republic of Moldova. Here, the countries, with our support, have started to cooperate 10, 20 years ago. And from the beginning, adaptation to climate change, in particular flood management at the start, was a main challenge. So we helped the countries develop a transboundary adaptation strategy to actually develop and implement some adaptation methods, such as ecosystem restoration and others, which were agreed at basin level. And most importantly, also to include these issues into the legal institutional framework. So the Dniester Treaty, which came into force in 2018, refers to emergency situation and also to water allocation, because water scarcity is becoming an increasing topic also there. And the Dniester Commission, which continues its work in the current difficult situation, also deals with emergencies, including flood and drought. And actually, in an upcoming JEF UNDP OCE project, which we are also supporting, now the adaptation strategy will be updated, like it's also happening in the Danube more broadly and the Rhine more broadly, as we heard. So this is an example of how adaptive management can happen at basin level, but actually also at community level through youth engagement and many other measures. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sonia, for these inputs on the importance of the Water Convention at the global level and how this can be implemented at the basin level as well. With this, I would like to invite Juan Carlos Sanchez, Senior Researcher at INWI, and with your global experience on policy in transboundary waters and water diplomacy, I wanted to ask you, what are specific policy practices, diplomacy practices that have proven being effective for climate resilience? Juan Carlos.
All of them? Okay, sorry for the confusion. Thank you very much, Diego, and thank you very much to the organizers for the opportunity to share some of the work that we have been doing from the International Water Management Institute. So from our perspective, we come more from an angle of research for development. And the IMI is a long-standing partner of the government of Zambia. And the case that I wanted to share today with all of you. Sorry, now I'm going backwards. Okay, so can I get a little bit of technical support here? Excuse me for the confusion. Yeah, basically the government of Zambia invited IMI to best understand what was the underlying causes that led to the 2018-2020 droughts in the Western province. And very soon we understood that that situation was not only a national Zambian situation, as you can see from the map to the right side corner of the slide, but it was really a cross-border or a transnational crisis, right? That was one of the first points. The second point here was that we quickly understood that we were moving from a just climate action circumstance into really a disaster risk management issue. So those maybe might be the two underlying contexts. I think also we have to recognize that in the context of transboundary river basins, last mile communities, in this case, these specific cross-border communities, order more often than not, they get left behind. So this is one of the things that obviously caused us a lot of stress when we went with the different teams to analyze what were the causes behind that prolonged droughts, because yeah, of course, in this context, being this specific site or this specific landscape, part of the Zambezi River Basin, there are policy instruments in place. It would be what my professor used to say, one of the most advanced jurisdictions in terms of policy and agreements for dealing with not only transboundary water cooperation, but also with aspects of climate change. So then you ask, what is the problem? And no surprise, implementation and financial sustainability turn to be two of the two most resilient aspects that come out as you try to trickle down into the community level what went wrong in this specific case. Coming out, I think, as some of the colleagues have already alluded into what can be done, I think that we need to recognize still the primary role of RBOs in coordinating different national efforts. I think that's already very well stated. We saw it in different examples by my other colleagues that have presented before. But I think it's very important, following also the intervention of our South African colleague, to make sure that as we are doing those harmonization plans and those coordination plans, that we put communities first. And I think that's something that we sometimes, because of the specific role of the RBOs, which are international government-led processes, we tend to forget that the ones that are bearing the impacts of climate change are the most vulnerable communities, which is also something that you can see in the slide, right? You can see the effects of droughts on real life people. So is their cattle, is their agriculture, those are the type of real life effects that you see out of specifically out of cross-border droughts in this context. So just to conclude, I think in terms of best practices, there are several good practices that have already been mentioned, including the ones that Sonia alluded to, making sure that there's basin-wide climate scenarios, that there's modeling in place, that that there are also decentralized bodies that support the implementation of these basin-wide agreements at the cross-border level, making sure that we don't let these communities behind. And in this specific case of Southern Africa, I think that it's a very interesting landscape, as there are very advanced commissions already in place. You know better than me that there's OCACOM, there's ORASECOM, very advanced jurisdictions, but there are also emerging new kids on the block, like BUPUSACOM. So I think that in that specific case of Southern Africa, there's a good role for organizations like ours to play in the context of knowledge sharing and making sure that some of the good lessons learned from some of the more experienced commissions can also be taken on board as needed by the new commissions that are emerging. So I think I'll leave it to that for the time being. Thank you very much.
Thanks Juan Carlos. And thanks for highlighting that when we deal with these climate-related challenges, it's not only about addressing things across sectors, as was mentioned before, but also covering all the different levels, from the global to the basin and all the way to the communities. So we're basically in a 3, if not 4-dimensional challenge set, which obviously doesn't make things easy, but it also makes them exciting. So great to hear that. I'd like to move to our next panelists. We'll be zooming in to one specific topic that I believe, and I know Zoe believes as well, is very crucial for dealing with floods and droughts and climate impacts, but one that we often forget, and that's wetlands. And that's Zoe Rosenblum's topic. Zoe was until recently a PhD student with us at the Shared Waters Lab partnership at Oregon State University, is now at the University College of Dublin doing her research, her postdoc on wetlands there. Zoe, please, why should we care about wetlands when it comes to climate risks?
Thanks, Susanna. So in my view, we need to look beyond concrete solutions of dams and hard infrastructure and start looking at more green solutions and nature-based solutions that exist in many of these shared basins. And so one thing we can do is to look beyond the river, looking at other shared ecosystems like wetlands, and in this way make the problem of climate resilience bigger. Rather than thinking about national climate security, looking at the basin scale, and ask ourselves what climate-related risks could be mitigated with nature-based solutions at the basin level, looking at a bigger map. An example of this would be the Nile Basin Initiative, which last year produced the Atlas of Transboundary Wetlands, recognizing the role of wetlands in climate resilience and safeguarding food, energy, and water security in the basin. And from the water diplomacy field, we know that joint study visits are an effective way of building trust and beginning to develop a shared knowledge base in a basin. And so to this end, having joint study visits to inventory wetlands on a basin scale could be an effective way of starting a conversation on joint strategies to achieve a variety of multilateral agreements. And so I want to really emphasize that when we talk about shared waters, it's not just rivers. We've had a lot of research focused on rivers, such as the map you're probably familiar with on the top left from the Transboundary Freshwater Diplomacy Database, largely put together by Melissa McCracken, our colleague who's in the room in case you have questions about it. But this is our 313 international river basins. You probably also know of the map on the top right from EGRAC on the shared aquifers, around 500 or more. And then beyond rivers, we also have wetlands, lakes, and other ecosystems that are affected by cross-border policies, infrastructure, and priorities. And so on the bottom left, we have a map of roughly 300 Ramsar sites that are located in international basins. Your country is most likely party to the Ramsar Convention on Wetlands, and through that, there are wetlands protected under that convention, wetlands of international importance. And then on the bottom right, we have a map of about 2.7 million kilometers squared. 43% of the world's wetlands are located in transboundary basins. That's about 80,000 of them. And so just some quick stats about wetlands related to drought. Wetlands absorb water and release it slowly during dry periods. And a recent study from Schuster et al. In Australia showed that 1 year after the restoration of floodplain wetlands, they continued to contribute to drought resilience. And so by re-wetting and planting more vegetation in wetlands, there's a 55% increase in soil moisture storage. And so then even after the wetlands themselves dry up in a basin, they continue to release water post-flood. And that's one of the ways that wetlands act as sponges. But it's also important to note that wetlands are not homogeneous. So if we start to talk about wetlands more in building climate resilience, we also have to know that wetlands are not all the same. Degraded wetlands, for example, are not as effective at a lot of the benefits that we receive from natural, well-functioning wetlands. Restoring them is a great option, but it's really expensive, and often it takes quite some time for the benefits to come back after restoration. And there's been quite some focus on peatlands as their top carbon sinks, so protecting or restoring peatlands. But there can be trade-offs to consider, because after the restoration of peatlands, they tend to release more methane in the short term, even though they have longer-term carbon storage benefits. Floodplain wetlands have largely been overlooked in the climate talks, I think. They account for more than 50% of global wetland cover, but they're often overlooked because compared to peatlands, they have lower carbon storage. But still, the many wetlands that are located in international river basins can provide an opportunity for countries to build their drought resilience. And so my call to you would be to talk to your neighbors about sharing the costs of restoration or protection of wetlands, so that you can also share the benefits of drought resilience, biodiversity conservation, and so much more, while also working towards the SDGs, the various multilateral environmental agreements, and the Ramsar Convention in particular recommends using wetland infrastructure to reduce risk of slow onset droughts, monitor wetland extent as an indicator of slow onset droughts, and account for wetlands in national drought management policies.
These inputs, and especially on the importance of understanding transboundary wetland governance, which is still to be explored. And with this, I would like to invite Saravanan Subramanian from the German Institute on Development and Sustainability, IDOS. Saravanan, how can we integrate, how can we involve more local communities, other actors in these policy approaches? Please let us know from your experience, how can we work towards this? Thanks.
Thank you so much. I fully agree on the importance of climate-related risk. At the same time, we need to look a little wider in context, wider in the context of conflicts, wars, financial crisis, and so on. And I draw this example from recent terrorist attack on Indian subcontinent by Pakistan terrorists, resulting in death of innocent people. And this terrorist attack led to stoppage or suspensions of the Indus Water Treaty, the 1960s Indus Water Treaty. So what does suspension mean basically by this? First and foremost, halting sharing information between two countries, India and Pakistan. Now, what information it is? It's a real-time information on flood risks, real-time information on hydrological measures, real-time information on river flows. Having said that, just yesterday, India on a goodwill basis warned Pakistan of a flooding risk that is coming up in Tavi River. It's one of the tributaries of Indus. Suspension also means that India can undertake significant measures being an upper riparian state. This includes modifying the water base in the hydrological system. It can build new dams. It can increase the capacity of dams, storage structures. It can divert waters. It can do several things under this suspension period. The suspension actually threatens the Pakistan's agriculture economy. 80% of the irrigated land depends on Indus water. So it is very significant. This suspension has led to further threats. Last week, the Pakistan Army chief, while he was visiting the United States, he made a statement of a nuclear war, not only against India, but half of this world. So these geopolitical tensions are deeply rooted in the colonial era practices and aggravated by the contemporary factors, including climate change. And the South Asia region, I think many of you might be aware, is one of the global hotspots of glacier retreat. And in this region, on an average, we have a retreat of 15 to 20 meters per year. And the Gangotri glacier, one of the significant, a larger glacier in this region, has retreated in the last 25 years, 850 meters. Now there is ice thinning taking place in this region. Ice thinning is one of the significant factor for increase of disasters, floods. And the region is the backbone of South Asian agriculture, sustaining about 1 billion people. And there is growing inequalities, not only within the countries, but across countries. So these geopolitical tensions, this case reveals that climate-related risks are deeply connected with the political security, insecurity, hydraulic conflicts, and financial challenges. Addressing the interconnected and multiple and compounding risks requires a more comprehensive approach, a multi-sectoral approach, than merely focusing on water and its related sectors. In terms of what practices and policies can we have in the process. One of the important things I draw from this particular region is confidence building measure and trust building measure. And I think in the morning we saw how in the Mekong communities are involved in the use of app and communicating and so on. It's something very good, a very nice initiative. And in the South Asian region, we have WhatsApp groups among people. Now, these WhatsApp groups are not at the higher level. These are by traders, because we have a very porous boundaries. The South Asian boundaries are highly porous. It's not very clear like it is there in Europe or something. We have a problem due to colonial era practices. And because of that, the traders move from country to country and they have WhatsApp group. They communicate. They're very good in communicating early warning systems too. So I think how do we build this? The joint trust building and confidence building measure is something very crucial in this area. And second is, science should start playing a major role in conflict-sensitive risk analysis. And the third area is joint sharing of information. Of course, I talked about WhatsApp group that is existing in this region, but also sharing information by the government or different tracks, the multi-tier diplomacy that we are talking about. And then, in all these things, inclusion of vulnerable communities are very important. And with this, I thanks. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Savaran, for these inputs on this very specific topic and how you link it with the other keynote speeches that we had today. And with this, please, I would like you to give a round of applause to all of our panelists. And if you have specific comments, questions to our panelists, please, we are going to open the mics to do so. But also, if you would like to share some specific good practices from your basins or the organizations where you work that have promoted the involvement of these local communities, environmental organization, or other groups in promoting water diplomacy and also climate resilience, please, I invite you to raise your hand so we can have a nice discussion with all of us. Thanks.
Don't be shy. Who wants to start? Antti.
Yeah, sorry. Antti Raatvaara, Special Envoy of Water from the Finnish Foreign Service. Maybe just a comment, but I do think that in the spirit of the UNEC Helsinki Water Convention, we should always be looking at countries having a treaty in place to be fully committed within the boundaries of the treaty to walk with it. In a way, the abeyance of industry seems a little bit, how would I phrase it? I would say a little bit sort of odd that the treaty on water, which has been in existence for more than 60 years, becomes to be part of the geopolitics in the region. So hopefully the two countries would resume to the table soon enough.
Back to the panel. Any other, as I said earlier, it's really difficult to see you. Any other thoughts, inputs on how your region, your basin, your country is dealing with climate-related challenges? Please.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Hans-Werner Theissen, GIZ. I have a question. My question is in this way, we are very well maybe prepared for the cases of droughts and floods, but what is our experience when really a drought happens? Do the countries really accept the treaties, or what is your experience on that?
That's a key question that I think nicely, I'm not sure which microphone to use, that nicely follows up on Antti. Yes, great to have treaties, but do they actually hold when crisis hits? Anyone has any experience in the room from your regions? Yes, I'll come to you.
Hi there, I'm Michaela from Australia, master's student. I live in the Murray-Darling Basin, which if you know anything about is a highly complex and contentious basin, but has had significant success in balancing the agricultural, social and environmental priorities across many boundaries. So my question, maybe following on from the GIZ question, is how have you seen relationships, personal relationships, relationships between researchers hold when treaties and conventions may be too high level?
Thanks. I think that's a nice series of questions that we can give back to the panel. What's the role of treaties? Do treaties hold when crisis hits? And if they don't, how can communities and researchers still keep it going? Who wants to start? Juan Carlos, you look as if you want to start. You have your own microphone. 4, in fact.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I'll give it a try. Obviously, they are very complex, difficult questions. But I think that they have to be addressed, especially with the urgency of and the speed of development of things in the current state of the world. Implementation of the spirit of the treaty, yes, that's even a principle of international law. So I don't know the case that was presented in detail, but it sounds to me definitely that that's an anomaly in the normal course of implementation of treaties, so that shouldn't be the case. Especially in water treaties that have a little bit of a different nature, right? It's not security treaties or it's not international commercial treaties, so they have a specific and a different nature. So I fully agree with the special envoy in the sense that the call for the parties to reflect and go back to the original spirit of the treaty. Can I try to be a little bit provocative? And
Please,
I think
yes.
that we also have to acknowledge to some extent the limitations of river basin organizations. I think that that's something very key, because I feel that more and more, as we continue to understand more the linkages and the challenges that are upon us, and we have moved from water to water resources, but now we're moving into cross-sectoral, so now we're bringing climate change, agriculture, we were speaking of disaster risk management, we are talking about multi-scales, and I'm really starting to wonder what is the capacity of an RBO to carry all of this burden, right? So I think that the only way forward for implementation of this huge works of program is through a coordinated partnership approach in which obviously the states, the national states play a huge role, but not only, right, it has to also trickle down to the last mile communities, as we were saying before, and that's where NGOs and that's where civil society also plays a big task, right? So the RBO, in my opinion, can and should still play this coordination role, and that's very key, but its implementation, to some extent, has to be prioritized, what the RBO can actually do and what it can't, and we need to be very clear up front also to make sure that the expectations and the realities of those most vulnerable on the ground, they are also placed in the middle and they are not left behind us, as was the example in the Zambian context. So yeah, those are a couple of reflections from my side.
Thanks, Juan Carlos. The other panelists, do you agree or other thoughts? Sonia.
Yeah, thank you very much, and very interesting discussion. I would say it depends very much on the design of transboundary agreement and basin organization, and obviously also on the persons involved and on the overall political situation. So we know that a number of basins, actually drought was even the origin of cooperation, like in the Senegal basin back in the 70s when the president at the highest level decided that drought should be addressed jointly through joint infrastructure. We can also see good examples like in Latin America, where on the Paraná basin between Brazil and Paraguay, they actually jointly addressed the drought situation. I think it was 2 years ago, by agreeing on joint measures. Also in transboundary agreement, it's important to include flexibility mechanisms where, for example, water allocations which are regularly revised or decided or agreed upon, like in between the Albufeira Convention between Portugal and Spain, or in Central Asia, where they actually annually agree on water allocation, and what's also very important is to include in a basin organization, for example, dispute resolution mechanisms. And I think quite a number of basin organizations have it, but also not all. And it's not always working, it's true. And here, that's also why how the Water Convention can help at the global level through its implementation committee. So the Water Convention has a implementation committee which is aimed to support countries in implementing the Water Convention when they have challenges, but also in preventing and addressing disputes. So, for example, that implementation committee is composed of very well-known lawyers, but also practitioners, and has an advisory mechanism function. So, for example, a few years ago, Montenegro went to that committee due to the construction of small hydropower plants by upstream Albania, and the committee helped the two countries to jointly address and find a solution in this situation. But I also would like to agree with what was said earlier, that obviously in addition to treaties, it's very important to involve communities, to have such informal mechanism, like you've mentioned, even on WhatsApp groups, or joint research or study trips, or twinning arrangements or others, which eventually will hopefully help then also to scale up at a higher political level when the situation improves.
Thanks. Very briefly, because I think we'd also like to hear from the room.
Thank you. During disaster, it's important for countries to take a step back and try to protect their nation before coming and supporting and getting into the regional cooperation agreement. Having said that, all nations are human bodies. They are human beings. They have self. You know, given that, like I gave an example, even though the suspension of Indus Water Treaty is in place, India on goodwill gesture keeps informing Pakistan on certain dangers that is occurring. But when it comes to terrorist attack, when it comes to security of the country, then countries take different stance. And I have my experience working on the Kenya and Tanzania border when the drought was still there. And the countries, both countries have different systems of functioning, the land systems, everything. But the Maasai community who uses the WhatsApp group, who keep migrating across both these countries, they have a very nice standards of adaptation and coping strategies. And I think this is something the government didn't take it up for various reasons. But this Maasai community, one of the largest communities moving from one place to another, especially Kenya and Tanzania, they were coping up very well. Yeah, just to give an example.
Thank you very much. So did you want to mention something in regards to these questions from the audience, please?
I think just very briefly, treaties set a legal basis for countries and governments to share data or focus on whatever the priority is set forth in the treaty. So I think they're an important way to have that legal basis for those sharing arrangements across borders.
Thank you very much. So, and just if I may, also from the points that all of you have raised, to show these complexities and the dynamics that are increasing in transboundary river basins, where we see these economic, environmental, social dimensions, and how, of course, legal and institutional arrangements perhaps are not ready or need to be rethought. They need to be revamped in order to address water diplomacy. And I think that we have some more minutes for a couple of interventions more. So if we can have two more colleagues sharing their experiences or asking a question. Please do so, colleagues. Thanks.
Tanya, yeah, I was thinking, it's so quiet. I hope that's not because there are no experiences, but because it's Monday morning. Tanya.
Yeah. Thank you to all the panelists. I'd like to share the experience from the Sava River Basin. It's part of the Danube River Basin, so drought is a fairly new phenomenon that we are still getting used to. And I was very interested to hear about the Mekong app, early warning app, because in the Sava River Basin we have a very sophisticated early warning system for floods. And it's now being upgraded for early warning for low. We don't call it drought; we call it low waters, because it mainly relates to the navigation. But this early warning system does not include the community level warning. So it depends on each country of how it's going to transmit these warnings then to the local population. So recently, in a few weeks, our government is introducing a national level, warning system that will work on mobile phones, but the other countries don't have that, and we've had cases since the system has been in place that the warning had been there, but the governments didn't react and warn people on the ground. So since I'm a deputy commissioner for the Sava River Basin, it gives me an idea on what we could actually do ourselves. And another point on drought, as I said, we're trying to get ready for that situation, because the droughts are becoming a recurring and more common phenomenon. But it's something that I am concerned. We're an upstream country, and how we're going to, how the governments are going to react in cases of long and extreme droughts, because we don't have an allocation system in the treaty. It's principle-based, which it's probably better, but still it leaves a question mark on how the governments are going to react, whether the strong functioning Sava River Basin Commission that we all trust is going to play the role it should play in these circumstances. Thank you.
Thanks, Tanya. I think these are two important questions. One is, okay, if we do have warning from one country to another, whether it's for flood or drought, does that actually guarantee that each country then also informs their local communities, right? That's yet another challenge. But I think the second point you highlighted is also quite important. How is trust, how is cooperation potentially, hopefully not, undermined as we're facing more low flows, more droughts? And I know that's a discussion in the Rhine as well. I know Switzerland, I don't want to put anyone on the spot here, but I know Switzerland is also upstream and has also faced, let's say, interesting questions from downstream countries on what will happen if the glaciers melt and the water flow in the Rhine changes, in case there's any inputs, but also from other basins. Any thoughts? Are you seeing changes in cooperation practices in a positive or in a negative way? Are you?
Thank you. Inge Jacobs-Mata from the International Water Management Institute. Thank you to the panelists. A bit related, but more also picking up what Juan Carlos and Sonia spoke about. My question or comment is more about how aligned or connected are water and climate communities of practice, or communities working on these issues. It is my experience in East and Southern Africa that actually they are very disconnected. Drought and flood management is in the realm of disaster risk reduction, managed by disaster management and mitigation agencies or Met departments. And when climate is addressed or drought is addressed in the transboundary water setting, it's more at that kind of broad hydrological assessment level, and really not at all in the action, in the preparedness, in the response. So how, or should, as Juan Carlos mentioned, should they even come together? My question is, how do they come together? But even, is that a bridge too far?
Any other thoughts or reactions to that from the audience? Otherwise, we'll give it back to the panel for a moment. I think we'll have time for one more round, so maybe we'll hear from the panel first. I mean, there were a number of issues. Sonia, which one would you like to pick up?
On that last question, yeah, I mean, the water and climate and disaster communities are not very well connected. I think it's already better now than it was 10 years ago. But I remember going to the climate COP in 2009 in Copenhagen, where I think there were maybe 10 water people among 10,000 climate people. I think we've come some way that now, for example, in that water was included in the cover decision at the COP in Egypt, that it was that Azerbaijan last year launched Baku Dialogue on Water for Climate Action, where actually there will be even a meeting on it tomorrow. And very important that water was included as first thematic target in the global warming adaptation. I think this was very important. And also how this happened because several experts from the water community have really engaged with the climate community. And I think this is also important for us as water. We cannot only think our own waterway. We need to also really go to the other sectors and understand their thinking, and actually we can learn a lot from them, both from the climate and from the disaster risk communities. I went to the Global Platform on Disaster Risk Reduction just for 2 hours in June, and I learned so much. I mean, I think we really need to break out of our silos, and also we then and even now is happening. Last week happened in Nairobi discussion on the global adaptation indicators, including on the water-related indicators. So I have not yet heard what are the outcomes, but this is, I think, a way now for our water community to finally be really also have an entry and being measured as an important part of the progress and adaptation globally, if and hopefully this will be decided in Belém in November. And finally, also including water into the climate frameworks, such as now the NDCs and NAP. So this year, many countries, including probably your countries, are working on revising the nationally determined contributions and also national adaptation plans. And in here, including water issues and also transboundary issues. We have carried out last year an analysis, and we have seen that so far a number of adaptation plans, but still only few have included transboundary aspects, but when it comes to NDCs, it's only less than 5%. So based on this, we actually published a few weeks ago a document on mainstreaming transboundary cooperation and also water supply and sanitation into NDCs and NAPs with specific recommendations. So I think these tools can help, and most important is us going to our own climate colleagues and energy colleagues and disaster risk reduction colleagues and trying to talk to them and that way establish the connection. We are slowly getting there, but there's still a way to go.
I'll try to be brief so that it doesn't seem that the right side is monopolizing the microphones, yeah? I think that there's evidence that we are getting better at integrating topics, and ecosystem-based adaptation, specifically in the context of wetlands, might be one of those pieces of evidence. 10 years ago, Sonia, or 15 years ago, when we started talking about bringing together water and climate agendas, that seemed almost impossible. So I'm happy to see that there's progress. Now the EBA agenda is quite advanced, and it moves a lot of resources for implementation and real action. Now we're seeing that there's different sectors that we have left behind. Like definitely disaster risk management is one that we need to bring into the table and make that fragility continue much more stronger, because it also has impacts on conflict, it has impacts on migration, it has impacts on job creation. So it goes back to the point of my colleague, beyond even traditional management of natural resources. It goes beyond to further economic and global issues that are very, very pertinent. So yeah, that's one. And in my opinion, the big elephant in the room continues to be agriculture. Right, we have talked about for decades of being the major user of water, yet the links beyond biodiversity, beyond the links, climate change, the links between the water and the agricultural sector, even the energy sector, they still, in my opinion, remain very weak. So yeah, okay, there's good evidence, but there's also very clear pathways and sectors where we need to make those connections much stronger.
I'm just curious, so do you share Juan Carlos' optimism when it comes to better integrating wetlands, for example, as one example for integrated approaches?
I will let Zoe answer that one, huh?
Yeah, I do. For me, when we talk about better integrating water, energy, food, climate, disaster resilience, I think of wetlands, and I'm biased because it's my background, but also like they store floodwaters in times of too much water. They release it slowly when there are droughts. In many parts of the world, they're used for agriculture, and the wetland field specifically has done a lot of research into polluticulture, so better managing wetlands alongside of agriculture. So we're kind of getting there. And then there's also a lot of research on the carbon storage of wetland soils. And so to me, that's one way of bringing all of these things together in a nice way, and that can be replicated also at the basin scale.
Thanks. Before we give maybe all of you a final word, I just want to check what the Rhine has to say, or Switzerland.
Suzanne, thank you very much. My name is Fabrice Fretz. I work for the Swiss Foreign Ministry. And since you were talking about Switzerland, let me just tell you a small anecdote that happened. I mean, an anecdote, yes. Last year, at the end of last year, Switzerland and Italy actually redesigned a little bit their frontier in these Alps, because one of the glaciers at the Matterhorn actually melted and shifted a bit the watershed, which was the national the natural frontier between Switzerland and Italy. And actually, both countries agreed pretty quickly on redefining a little bit the frontier, just a couple of 100 meters difference. Actually, Switzerland went a little bigger, a few hundred meters. But that's just the anecdote. But I think this example shows that the importance of existing frameworks, conventions, it was mentioned, and practices of transboundary water cooperation. That happened fairly easily and naturally between two neighboring countries that have good relations. But certainly the framework is important, and I think it'll be all the more in the future when, of course, the effects of climate change will have greater impacts than that. Thank you.
Thanks. I think that's, Fabrice, a very interesting topic, and that gets the lawyer and me excited. The impact that climate change, and with it shifting river patterns, shifting talwegs, which are often used for defining national boundaries, the impact that will have is completely underexplored. So if there's any people in the room, any students, law students who are looking for PhD topics, I think that's very exciting. So very important point. Any other comments, questions from the audience sharing your experiences? Yes.
Good morning, my name is Gerrit Steehouwer from Oxfam. We work on South Asia as well, on transboundary rivers, and that's a region where there are no treaties, right? No basin organizations. There are bilateral treaties on water sharing, but not a broader view. And we are setting up, and we have been successful in getting mayors involved and traders to make declarations on sub-basins. So we try to build it bottom up with civil society and local governance. But what type of support a UN Water Convention gives to non-state actors? I mean, we are very happy with Bangladesh signing up, but we do not have any indications yet of other states in South Asia signing up. So how could a convention help non-state actors active across borders? So in absence of all these things, what can we do? What's your advice?
Thanks. Very concrete question that I think, Sonia, you can maybe take up in your final statement from the panel, which, as I'm not seeing any other questions, I think I would give it back to the panel, and maybe we start with your side. Just a final brief statement, maybe the main lesson you took from this session.
Well, thank you so much. Well, I come from a science background, and I've also been very actively involved in policy level changes. And one of the things I'm very proactively, trying to be provocative in this sense. Scientific research on transboundary river science has been mere a high school level of modeling. Okay, and this is one of the major problems of science. Science has not been able to capture complexity, multiplicity of problems. There are modelings being done, but in terms of transboundary river basins, it's very limited to high school model of linear thinking. So when I say high school model of linear thinking, it is 1 + 1 = 2. We all learned it in the school. And what we tend to do is we keep on using that in our studies, in modeling. But natural resources, living beings, don't behave in that sense. These arithmetics, linear thinking, doesn't apply to complex systems like transboundary river basins. And this is one of the core problems. I can explain to you much more how it can be applied to glacier melts, how it can be applied to flood planning, and so on, so on. But the essence is there are 3 areas the policy needs to focus on. One is already in some places they are moving it. We need to move from prediction adaptation to more concise institutional environment adaptation. That is something very different. And second is co-production of knowledge. We are not simply talking about government levels and local people. Now how these can be integrated and jointly help in trust building and confidence building measures. And many countries, including South Asia, they have been doing, despite the suspension of Indus Water Treaty, there is already a background communication channel open by the governments to do that. And already there is channels open for research institutions and civil societies to engage with the Pakistani counterpart. So these are all going on because all of us are human beings. We feel we need to help others. It doesn't mean that we stop something. So these are all going on at different levels. So in essence, I would stop at 3 points. Thank you so much.
Zoe, any last thoughts?
I think especially hearing my colleagues Sonia and Juan Carlos mention that it's been 10 or 15 years of trying to bridge the water and climate and disaster, these different communities. One, it's interesting seeing that they're finally coming together more, but also it shows that we have a lot of work to do because if we, for example, wait another 10 or 15 years before better including wetlands and lakes and other aquatic ecosystems into that same planning, then that's not enough time.
Sonia, maybe you can combine it with that one specific question.
Yeah, thank you. I think indeed, as it was mentioned by several of you, the global treaties and transboundary basin agreements are crucially important, but also the multi-level governance is important. And transboundary cooperation happens at different levels, like also Fabrice has said. And even in Geneva, where I'm living, there's local cooperation happening between Switzerland and France. And even just recently, they have revised the transboundary agreement on the shared aquifer. Or there's transboundary restoration sites happening, transboundary wastewater treatment plants. So there are many different levels which can and should be somehow linked together in transboundary cooperation efforts. And that also brings me to answer the other question regarding South Asia and particularly Bangladesh. So firstly, obviously we do hope that now with Bangladesh joining the Water Convention that other countries will also join. And we are trying to actively working on this by organizing regional events such as an upcoming training on international water law in Bangkok in December, working with regional organizations like ICIMOD, trying to involve Nepal, Bhutan, even India and others as much as possible. But yes, also we try to work on involving of non-state actors in our governance structure, in our meetings. We had a special session on this at one of our recent Working Group IWM meetings, and particularly on the pilot project, we focus on this, like even on the Dniester, which I mentioned earlier, but also in another example on the Neman, where we even started with scientific cooperation as a first step, and then later on involved more the political level. But certainly there's a way to go, and we need to bring together those different levels and also improve the science policy interface in existing transboundary cooperation efforts. Thank you.
Thanks. And Juan Carlos, you have the nearly last word.
Okay, so I think moving forward, it's very important to recognize that the treaties are the stepping, the fundamental stone. They set the rules of the game. They are the framework for these relationships towards the future. So we need still to recognize that there's big effort to bring treaties and organizations to a significant portion of transboundary river basins that don't have those mechanisms in place. I think that's Yeah, that's very clear. In the context of basins that do have treaties in place and have basin management plans in place, we need to go through a case-by-case study to understand whether they are sufficient to tackle the challenges of the future. So there might be a need, like in the Okavango, to renegotiate the treaty, or it might be something like in the Nile that it can be done through climate proofing those existing management plans. Issues of data, I think that they are critical to understand what are the projections towards the future and move away from that high school modeling that you're talking about and really put resources to it. I think we need to make sure, as we said before, that we keep the most vulnerable in the center of implementation plans. So gender strategies are obviously one, but we also spoke about the youth, because it links also to that topic that we wanted to bring to the table, which is the issue of migration, the issue of job creation, the issue of development on the basin itself. And one last thing that I really look forward to hearing more from you in this week is the use of artificial intelligence in all of these processes, right? We have been in this business of transboundary water basin management for plus 20 years. We know how the decision support systems were 20 years ago, but now we have different tools, different capacities to process so much data that puts together socioeconomic, hydrological, climate, etc., etc. So I'm very curious, very interested to explore with colleagues in the Water Week, how can we make use of artificial intelligence to improve the decision making and the governance of these shared territories. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Juan Carlos, Sonia, Zoe Sabanan, for these key insights. And with this, thank you very much. I would like to invite our online speaker, Dr. Indrajit Pal, from the Asian Institute of Technology. Indrajit, please, can you hear us?
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Can you hear?
Yes, we can hear you very well. And now you have the difficult task of summarizing this, this intervention and provide us with some concluding remarks. Please, Indrajit, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. So I'm from the disaster management background. Right now I'm located in Thailand. So I'd like to convey my sincere thanks to the keynote speaker, esteemed panel members, and especially moderators for this engaging session. It's really challenging, as we mentioned, summarizing the 7 to 8 influential talks in few lines. So I'll try my best to do that. So we have started with understanding about the water is a common crisis and cooperation is a key to the success. So you all know that transboundary water resource management also highlighted in that particular section at the opening session. The final word from Mariam was like, we should be united for the water security. That's the key from that session. And we got a very interesting insight from Mekong River Commission, Mr. Somporn, about how community can be engaged for the early warning system. So community-driven early warning system would help in the flood management, and especially the early warning system. And from the European component, we got a very good case study from the Danube River Basin. So it's a evolving risk of drought, as I mentioned. The drought was not the disaster in the past, but now the river basin is facing a lot of challenges. So it's a cross-boundary impact also has been highlighted in that section. So later on, we have seen like the drought as a transboundary river basin through the to manage the drought, like appropriate institutional framework can be developed for the basin level organization, which is also not much visible in many of the places. So data management and the drought management also should be synced. And the next point came like capacity building and the learning exchange also very much necessary for the adaptive management at the basin level and the community level of climate risk. So then from the International Water Management Institute, which highlights the climate challenges at the various levels, starting from the global to the community level, to the institutional cooperation and collaboration. And we got a very interesting insight from Joe, emphasized that importance of wetland and nature-based solution, and inventory of the wetland and especially the different level of peatlands also mentioned, and which is most importantly important component of the transboundary wetland management. Wetland restoration also highlighted as one of the major component with the example like flood resilience mechanism and drought resilience mechanism also. And also how the community can be engaged with the wetland management for drought management in some locations. And we got some slightly different insight from Sarvanan, which highlighted like transboundary water diplomacy, which also decision influenced by the conflict and geopolitical situation. So also highlighted the development of joint trust building for the early warning system. And there are some informal network system also mentioned, but I think we need to also look into that as well. Hydrological disaster management through the coping mechanism of the community, which is also through the some informal system. I'd like to conclude the whole process in a way like with few concerns for the consideration of the global community. So primarily the traditional singular focus of the whole water diplomacy is a mostly volumetric approach. So we were trying to talk about the water volume in general. But I believe like the holistic approach should be considered: water quality, water quantity, preservation of wetland, biodiversity, soil erosion, and also the nature-based solution, which will be beneficial for the longer term and the water secure community. And the final component is like the transdisciplinary approach to address the transboundary issues. I think we also highlighted some of the components in the last round, like the silo approach. So a systems dynamics or systems approach should be implemented to understand the transdisciplinary process to address the like transboundary issues of the water diplomacy through the climate crisis also. So with that, I'd like to conclude, and thanks to the entire set of our team. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Indrajit. And with this, I would like to thank all the co-conveners, BMU, the Asian Institute of Technology, the GEF, and the work also through IDW Learn, IHE Delft, and all of our partners, IMWI, GIZ. Thank you very much, and let's continue discussing over the course of this week about best approaches to strengthen water diplomacy and water cooperation. Thank you.